இப்போ நீங்கள் கோர்ட்டுக்கு போய் சொன்னீங்கன்னா ஒரு ஜட்ஜி நிற்கிறாரு, இப்போ நான் ஜட்ஜின்னு நினச்சிக்கோம், நீங்கள் என்ன சொல்ல விரும்புகிறீங்க அவர்கிட்ட?
என்ன, என் பிள்ளை தூக்கில் போட வேண்டாம், என் பிள்ளை தூக்கில் போட வேண்டாம். அவன் இருக்கட்டும், 20 வருஷம்ல 10 வருஷம்ல 15 வருஷம்ல இருக்கட்டும். அவன் நல்ல முறையாக நடந்துக்கணும். அவன் அந்த மாதிரி பிள்ளையில யாரை இழுத்து கொண்டு விட்டுட்டாங்க, வேணும்னு வச்சு விட்டுட்டாங்க, மாட்டி விட்டுட்டாங்க. அவன் அமெரிக்கா வரைக்கும் போய் இந்த ஸ்போர்ட்டில் பந்தயத்தில் ஜெயிச்சு ஃபஸ்ட்டில் பர்சனாக வாங்கிட்டு வந்திருக்கான் அந்த நாட்டுக்காக. 8 வருஷம் ஆர்மியில் இருந்திருக்கிறான், ஆர்மியில் 8 வருஷம் உழைச்சிருக்கிறான். இந்த நாட்டுக்காக நல்ல பிள்ளையாத்தான் நடந்தான். இது வரைக்கும் எந்த ஒரு ரெக்கார்டும் அவனுக்கு இல்லை. இந்த ஒரு முறை அவனை மன்னிச்சு விட்டுட்டா போதும்னு தான் நான் கெஞ்சி கேட்குறேன். அந்த பிள்ளைகளுக்கு ஒரு தகப்பனாக இருக்கணும், நல்லது கெட்டது அவன் நின்று பார்க்கணும் அந்த பிள்ளைகளுக்கு. அதான் வேணும் எனக்கு. தூக்கில் மத்திரம் போட வேண்டாம்.
www.asiademocracy.org, of which Dr. Sun John is the chair. It's a regional organization, and I request that perhaps you can also fill out that particular form. It's no, was Mr. JBJ when we said, okay, JBJ is speaking, and they are happy, they pick up the leaflets. And then Mr. Anthony Wee, Mr. Anthony Yo, Mr. Ravi, Mr. Sammy Dore, Dr. Chisun John, and Mr. Tim Parrott. I'll talk about Mr. Tim Parrott for a bit. Mr. Parrott represents the international organization Amnesty International.
Is there another human way to deal with it? In Singapore, they said we will not look at a person's background or the circumstances in sentencing these individuals. In Singapore, death penalty is mandatory for more than 30 crimes. And especially in drugs, a certain weight is given. And in terms of defense, it is you are already presumed to be guilty. And that is one of the position the Human Rights Commission does not agree with Singapore. An individual cannot be presumed to be guilty on the day of arrest because I have so much drug and so on. Here, sign on, the CDOG, which is a discrimination against women. All these things are not taught in law in your primary school, simplified to a level for a secondary school student who will go to work or university. Or you make even these things nobody knows. So what happens in a police detention center? Do we know how to defend our own? Because of that and much more, I think my time is due. We will also call for a complete Shanmugam. So with that note, you can find or contact us through our website, and we will be able to furnish you with a copy in future.
She's. We may also to address the meeting at the end of the speakers if she's up to it. And we have the children to Shanmugam with us. They are twins. They are Gopalan and Krishna. They are 14-year-old, and they've also assisted in some of the leafleting of this public meeting, I think, this week.
You've been told that by the statement from Amnesty that the death penalty is a violation of human right. Of course it is, and one mustn't forget that human the right to life is the most valuable and the primary right of human beings. And the death penalty is the carrying out of a sentence to kill someone by order of a court made in the name of the people and for the people. That's important, that every decision of a court in criminal matters is made on behalf of the people and for the people. So it's a matter that should concern vitally all citizens of the country. It's in their name that the person is hanged or put to death. It is in their name that a person is sent to prison and incarcerated. So these are matters not just for the court or for a handful of the lawyers, but are matters which concern every single citizen of the country. If we are unable to say that, if the citizens are unable to repose confidence in the system of justice and to say that only a guilty person, only the wrongdoer and not an innocent person will ever be found guilty, we are taking a risk, a calculated risk of sending innocent people to the gallows or incarcerating them in prison. And that is an alarming state of affairs in any society, that there is a risk of innocent people being detained in prison or sent to the gallows. No one can feel secure under that system of law. It's very important that the citizen feels secure that the system of justice will ensure that no innocent person will ever be punished. From what I read, was not certified to be of unsound mind. He was certified to be suffering from schizophrenia. I made a statement.
Okay, our next speaker will be Mr. Ravi, who is going, he's an advocate solicitor, as I've said. He's going to do a case study on Vikas.
The other one is man-made disaster. I ask you, which is the greatest of all? History bears testimony that man-made disaster is much more greater and far-reaching than natural disasters. A very good afternoon to one and all. Economy is the buzzword in Singapore. Human rights has become the buzzword. We hear about best practices in corporate governance. Best practices in corporate governance must mean best practices in human governance. And best practices in human governance must mean better safeguards to ensure individuals do not suffer from miscarriage of justice. In ensuring these safeguards, before you even decide on whether to go ahead with death penalty, you must ensure, of course I'm fundamentally opposed to death penalty, but before you even decide to have death penalty, you must have enough safeguards in the law, in the system that addresses the inadequacies and the safeguards that would allow the individuals to present effectively his case in court or even before that. In Britain, they abolished death penalty, I believe, in the 60s. The 60s. And you also had a spate of cases, even after the abolition of the death penalty, the Guildford 4 case. You would have heard about that case. Cardiff 3, Maguire 7, they all go in numbers. So, having despite the abolition of death penalty in England, they still had all this miscarriage of justice cases, which means life imprisonment and so on and so forth. The English courts found, as well as the community there, they found that it was still not good enough a safeguard for miscarriage of justice. The courts are not just adequately have these measures to redress. So what they... Now, Vignesh Murthy versus the public prosecutor. This case hit the press in the year 2003, September, and I was very badly hit by the press. Thanks to Singapore's 147th position, they should be proud that they are ahead of Cambodia. I think it's 148 if I'm not mistaken. The press can clarify this later. My practice was going quite all right until I took this case. I was enjoying my IT law and intellectual property laws with a bit of corporate, with a bit of crime, a criminal law that is. Freudian slip. We are all partners in crime here, you know. Shouldn't be gathering here. So, Mr. Jeyaretnam brought the case up to me, and he had a great opinion affixed to the petition for clemency. And I looked at the family, and they're really poor. They don't have any money at that stage. They've already paid all the money. Alongs were after them. They ran from Ipoh all the way secured at JB Alongs chased away to Singapore. So to that extent, they were really poor, and they had some help from some churches who gave them some accommodation during the course of the trial. There were months and months that was going on. Unfortunately, it was at a very late stage that I got this case. And it had, as Mr. Jeyaretnam had discussed earlier, that the case had already gone to the trial in the High Court. The case was over. It went to the Court of Appeal. Court of Appeal appealed dismissed the appeal. Thereafter, it went to the President for clemency. Clemency was dismissed on September 5th. What happens? From 5th of September, he was due to be executed 2 or 3 weeks thereafter. That's the standard. So I come on the 10th of September. Not that I have great experience, but I've done some trials in the High Court, including one murder trial. And I looked at the opinion of Mr. Jeyaretnam. I had very little records and drips and drabs from the family. I mean, they don't keep the records, and I don't blame them because of the kind of trauma that they were also in. And anytime the boy was to be executed. So at that point, I decided to take up the case and wondering what procedure can I bring this up to the courts again, because as far as the courts are concerned in previous cases, that you can't really bring up a case which has already passed the Court of Appeal. So that was the major obstacle there. And what is the seriousness of the case here? As Mr. Jeyaretnam has earlier highlighted to you, there were two issues. One, during the trial itself, the prosecution sprang a surprise on the lawyer of a recorded conversation with the narcotics officer, and the trial judge had heavily relied on that statement to convict the Vignesh Murthy. Ordinarily, for the benefit of those who are here who are not lawyers, anyway, Law Society is also not here, I suppose, all are not lawyers. Lawyers too, I don't know whether they take great interest in justice. I can comfortably say this if there's no complaint to the Law Society on this. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sorry. They have protected me adequately there. No, lawyers can take jokes, don't worry. So anyway, the thing is that this statement was thrown at the prosecution. The prosecution threw the statement at the lawyer, and the lawyer did not have enough time to take instructions from his client, and hence couldn't exhaustively cross-examine the statement and the witness who made that statement. And so much of kiasunas was going on. They don't finish up the case, and also another problem in that case was that the accused was dissatisfied with his counsel. The judge said next day, bring a new counsel. Which lawyer in town at that stage would want to take up the case? A man's life is at stake. You expect a counsel to come the next day, a new counsel, to read up everything and take up the case and effectively argue? Why the hurry? What sort of efficiency are we gearing towards? We are so proud that from the time the man had been held and the time the body decomposes, it's about 18 months, is it? Singapore takes great pride in such issues. So these are all statistics after statistics and so on and so forth. So these were the unsatisfactory features of this case, and I had the unenviable task again of filing a motion in the High Court and arguing before the court. And when the case came up for mention, just 1-2 days before the hearing itself, I filed the application. I had an acrimonious exchange with the judge, which was widely reported. And however, the focus on the case was completely blacked out from the Straits Times. More interested in whether I'm migrating to Australia or not. That was the issue. And what I was asking was, I don't have the records, Your Honor. I need time. Give me at least 6 weeks to look into the records. I have drips and drabs from the family. And I can't just rely on Mr. Gerald's opinion. I have to just effectively read through the records to satisfy myself. But I was convinced by the opinion though. No adjournment was granted, and hence I had to go on with my arguments. Motion was dismissed, and I filed another application. Again, it was dismissed. That application was heard before Mr. Lai Kiew Chai, and I appealed to the Court of Appeal. I filed the application on the 24th of September in the Court of Appeal. Within 24 hours, the Court of Appeal convened. It was very rare that they convened within such a short time, because the boy was to be executed on 26th. 24th file application in Court of Appeal, 25th hearing, 26th execution. Super fast, huh? So when it came before the Court of Appeal, again I had the unenviable task. I saw at the bench Mr. Yong Pang Hao was sitting there together with Mr. Chow Wik Ting and Tan Lee Ming. And Mr. Yong Pang Hao and Mr. Chow Wik Ting had already heard the case before at the Court of Appeal. So I was trying to convince that both of them should disqualify themselves from the bench, because they can't be judged in their own cause, because they've heard that previous appeal and they've dismissed. Of course, they had a different reasoning to that, and I respect the court's decision. What else can I do? Respect the court's decision and agree here and disagree with that 1 year later or 2 years later. And so after that, I presented the arguments. The court said no. As far as we are concerned, the Court of Appeal has already heard the case. That's it. We cannot look into and reopen the case at all. To which I asked, and of course cases were cited and bundle of authorities were submitted. How about fresh evidence? If 3 days before, this came up as a discussion. 3 days before the execution was due in one of the cases, it's called Abdullah versus blah blah blah. Okay, in that case, 3 days before, a fresh evidence was adduced. The court said no. You cannot adduce any fresh evidence. Once the Court of Appeal is over, you cannot bring any more evidence. That's the end there. So this is the difficulty that I had. I canvassed 32 arguments. The court said, we have no jurisdiction to look into all your arguments. And to which I asked, I don't want to be off-quoted when it comes to... I then asked, at the end of the 3 hours hearing, I was fortunate to be given 3 hours, and I know I have 5 more minutes. I wish to thank the Today paper, and I will definitely thank the Straits Times later. In the Today paper, it came out, when Mr. Ravi asked the Chief Justice if the public prosecutor was still maintaining that an innocent man be hanged because of procedure, because you say that I can't bring the evidence, any new points can't be canvassed because the Court of Appeal has already exercised its jurisdiction, then are you then still maintaining then an innocent man can be hanged because of procedure? The CJ answered, yes, the answer is yes. That has to be the logical conclusion, isn't it? If you don't have jurisdiction, an innocent man can be hanged. So, was Vignesh Murthy innocent? Was he hanged due to the legal procedures in Singapore? Was the question raised by Today paper. Then, after that he said, yes, what can I say? My client stood up. He's not afraid to die tomorrow, but he wants to know something which I was really amazed, the kind of, that what he said to the court was, I am not afraid to die tomorrow, but please let me read exactly from the Straits Times to be safe. Friday, September 26, 2003, page 5. After his case was dismissed, as more than 10 of his family members wept in the public gallery, Whitney stood up and asked the court what the grounds for his decisions were. Because I argued all these points, it's okay if you are hanging me tomorrow, but give me the grounds of the decision. I need to know why. The Chief Justice said that the reasons would be published in due course. Is it a joke? And the man is dead? The reasons were published, I think, on the 20th of October. It came out in the papers again. Now, after that, the Chief Justice said, you better say goodbye to him. I think that's all you can do at this point of time. I leave all this to you to make your own conclusions. And so he was hanged the next morning. And our 14 days of sleepless nights are spent in struggling with this case. And what I heard when I was just on my way to court, the Vignesh Murthy's, he has 3 sisters, in fact. He was the eldest in the family, his only son, 22-year-old boy. Sister called me up on the phone and said that we have to actually arrange for a cremation immediately. Otherwise, the state will organize a state funeral, which means by 1 o'clock the body has to be taken away. And this family has no money. What do we do? There's little help was, I mean, the man is already dead. Give some time for them to mourn, bring the relatives. In fact, according to the father, Vignesh Murthy said that he wanted to be cremated in Singapore so that every Singaporean has to pay a price one day. I do believe in such curses as having seismic impacts. So that was the end, and I had to again fork out funeral expenses, and the casket company came up after me, which when I defaulted on my payments to them. So what we can do is that, aside from the merits of Shanmugam, in particular, he was a jet ski competition, he won medal for Singapore. He was also in the military for 8 years, exemplary conduct he achieved, and he also was involved in sports council, I think. So there are other grounds. I mean, he has 2 boys, and the mother, 14-year-old twins, and he's also a divorcee. And he took custody of these 2 boys. The wife is not maintaining these 2 boys or looking after them. And the mother, she has a metal plate in her spine. She has some back injury, and she is just, hoping that there's some help, that somewhere this ray of hope may come through your plea to the President and support. I thank you.
Thank you, Salbia. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, I say we hang Shanmugam. Hang him. But don't hang him in Changi prison. Hang him here, somewhere along Orchard Road. Find an open space. I think there's some open space up in front of Neon building. Set up our gallows there. Announce it. Announce the date of hanging. And make sure that all of us bring our family, our children, our friends, congregate over there to see the hanging. We may see him having been dragged out, kicking and screaming, or he may just walk out calmly because they may have given him some Valium to help him relax. And then we'll see him being brought up to the platform, the gallows. We'll see the rope being put around his neck, tightened up so that it comes up to the left ear. His hood will be on, and then we'll hear bam, the trapdoor being opened. His body will come down. He may rise for a few seconds, but he will stop. He will die. And then what we'll need to do is take off his hood, because his face will be purple because of the choking. His tongue will be swollen and protruding out. his eyes may have popped out. And then we may see urine, or feces, or even semen, because these are all the bodily reactions, the violent reactions. Should we do that? No? Anybody? Can you tell me why, at least, we shouldn't have this hanging out in Orchard Road? Somebody. Anybody? Come on. Too? Inhumane. Now, mind you, all this that I've just described happens in Changi Prison. So what you're saying is that just because it's too inhumane for us to do it on the public, it's all right if we did it in Changi Prison, out of sight, out of mind, out of our conscience. Is that what we have become? A society that if you keep things undercover, you don't have to bother with our so-called civilized nature. It's all right. Think about it. And this goes to the issue, if we don't want the public to know about it, then how does it become a deterrent? I'm sure many of you have been to some airports in Australia, right? When you get out of the plane, every other few meters that you walk, you see a sign. Declare it or dump it, correct? You walk further down, another sign until you get immigrations. And then you think to yourself, maybe I shouldn't be bringing this bakwa or whatever, or chili padi or whatever into Australia, correct? So you put it aside. Now, why can't we have the same thing in Singapore? When you're walking down the airport, if you have any drugs, declare it now or you will be hanged. And have a picture of somebody hanging, or even a video playing that's hanging, right? Causeway, same thing. As cars are piling up waiting to get to the customs, have all these shots going on. Why don't we have that? Why? We do that for cigarettes, right? You buy a packet of cigarettes now, they'll tell you warning, and they show you this really gruesome picture of this cancerous person having this cancerous growth. Why? Because we don't want to be seen as this uncivilized society. We'll continue to hang people. You don't want visitors to come in and get confronted with this man being hanged. And yet, this is what goes on behind closed doors. I'll come back and talk about this point about deterrence for a little while. But I just want to go on and talk about some of the objectives of punishment, of which there are three. First, you have rehabilitation. Then you have retribution. And then, of what I just talked about, deterrence. The latter two are what's germane to our discussion here today when we talk about capital punishment. You cannot rehabilitate a dead person. Right? Let's talk about retribution. Revenge. The most pro-death penalty people will always cite this case. If someone's life has been taken, the family and friends have the right to seek the life of his killer. Correct? Maybe you can make that kind of a life for a life kind of an argument. Justice. But think about it in this case, in Shanmugam's case, and for that matter, any other case concerning drug trafficking. Who is the victim? Think about it. Who is the victim? In a murder case, you have the murderer holding the weapon to the victim's body and inflicting death, giving the victim no chance at all. Correct? But in this case here, in Shanmugam's case, he never held a gun to the person's head and say, take this drug or I'm going to kill you. Correct? Whoever went to buy the drug that Shanmugam brings in would have to make that one conscious effort to obtain the drug and then consume it. Right? If that's the case, how different is it then from smoking? Do we then go and hang tobacco makers? Hang the people that allow them to be to be brought in? Because I can tell you, nicotine, tobacco is just as addictive. I'm sorry, it may not be as addictive, but it's still addictive. And we know, scientific fact, that smoking causes cancer, which is one of the biggest killers in Singapore, if not the world. Why didn't we go hang these people? Then you make the case that you're going to draw it further. You have gambling addicts, right? People who actually go out and take their life because they cannot handle their gambling debts. Do we then execute the casino operators or the people that allow casinos to come in? Be set up? No, I'm not being facetious about it. I want you to really think about it because I just want to force the logic of the government's argument that the death penalty must be given to drug traffickers. And whilst we are on traffickers, I also think about this. The people that were hanging, the Shanmugams, the Vietnamese Murthis, they are the small-time drug peddlers. Kuching Kurau. You know who are the big-time people? They're the people sitting up in Burma. Let me bring you some of the highlight to you. And before I do that, I also want to bring up this matter. I've been in the police force during NS, and I was there. We were talking about some of these issues. You know how you begin to get some of these drug we call mules, right? Syndicates. They won't just send in one, they'll send 4, 5, even 10 sometimes. What they'll do is then they'll tip off the CNB on the Singapore side. Look for this person with a green backpack, ponytail, green shirt, blue shirt, whatever. Right? And the police busy looking up for his profile. And they catch him, they say, hallelujah, we've got this guy already. They celebrate, big news. Meanwhile, the rest of them have gotten through because this one was decoy. You get set up. And it's true, it happens. Ask around. And a lot of times these are victims that are in economic hardship. They owe sharks money, and all the loan sharks will tell them, bring this drugs in, we'll call it even. This is what we're talking about. Now, if we're talking about drug traffickers, the real big-time drug traffickers, let me show you some of these drug traffickers. One of them that I know of very well, and I've done a lot of research on him, is this guy by the name of Lo Sing Han. He's an ethnic Chinese, Burmese. Right? Asia Week described him as a celebrated figure in the Asian drug trade. The ethnic Chinese warlord ran a powerful government-backed militia force as well as convoys of opium from northern Shan State south to heroin refineries along the Thai border. If you don't know, opium is that first starting point where you actually can refine the sap and then it becomes heroin. Okay? The Nation, US publication, said, as of 1994, Law controlled the most heavily armed drug trafficking activities in Southeast Asia. Today, he rules with godfather status over a clan of traffickers, and his organization controls a substantial amount of the world's opium production. Now, he has a son. His name is Stephen Law. I don't know why the spelling of his surname is a little different. But Law is a... I'm sorry, let me go back a little bit. Lo Sing Han runs a company called Asia World Company. His son manages it. Right? Law's power and connections are unparalleled. No other domestic investor in Burma can get an audience with a cabinet member with one phone call. When Law got married, 8 cabinet members showed up. We have information that leads us to believe that Stephen Law is a trafficker in illicit substances. He has been denied a visa into the US because of these unsuspected drug activities. But, if you look at the situation, I can show you documentary evidence that Singapore government, our Singapore, yes, government, has been dealing with the Burmese government. Relations with Lo Sing Han. But before I do that again, I just want to show you Low's relations with the Burmese government. In 1993, Low was granted the privilege from Lieutenant Kin Yun, who was the #1, I don't think he's anymore with the Burmese government. Lieutenant General Kin Yun to smuggle heroin from the Koh Pang group to Tachalek. which is on a Thai border without interception. That came from Thailand's Office of Narcotics Control Board, for those of you who are behind and cannot see. Madeleine Albright, former US Secretary of State, said, "We are increasingly concerned that Burma's drug traffickers, with official encouragement, I emphasize official encouragement, are laundering their profits through Burmese banks and companies, some of which are joint ventures with foreign companies." And who are these foreign companies? What are these joint ventures? Yeah, could you go on, Ken? Can you go on? The Singapore government, I'm sorry, let me go back one step. There is an investment company called the Myanmar Fund. And this Myanmar Fund owned 25% of Loh Sing Han's company. I mentioned the Asia World Company. Okay, how is the Singapore government tied in? Well, the GIC, of which Mr. Lee Kuan Yew is the chair, and his son is the deputy chair. GIC held a 21.5% share in the Myanmar Fund. Alright? Now, I'll give you some of these quotes that showed how Singapore's extent of our involvement with either Loh Sing Han or the Burmese government, which supports Loh Sing Han. Robert Galbert, former Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, you call them with the US State Department, said since 1988, over half of the investments from Singapore have been tied to the family of narco trafficker Loh Sing Han. More than half of the investments. Okay? Another US official said, Singapore is more involved with Loh than any other country because that's basically where Stephen Law is functioning out of when he is not in Burma. If you go down to Shenton Way, I believe, or at least this was in, you find his office in Shenton Way. I think it was in this DBS building. There was a documentary. And this documentary was produced by the Special Services in Australia. Documentary, I remember at that time, the late Gopal Bharatham, he called me up and says, "Look, I hold this document. He gave it to me. I brought it up at the press conference. Okay, I gave the documentaries out to the press. None of it came. The day after, the government then accused me of being a traitor on the Australians to tarnish the image of Singapore. Well, the station then called up our ambassador to Australia. At that time, I think he was Winston Chu. To ask him to come on this program. If what we're saying is not accurate or is untrue, rebut. He didn't want to. Upon which then the station then wrote to the Singapore government and said, "Send a representative down." They didn't want to. Now, let me, if it hasn't hit you already, just think for a moment. The hypocrisy that goes on. We are going to hang Shanmugam for peddling what? 800 grams. Translate that into dollars. How much is it? And yet, we've been doing business with one of the world's biggest drug lords. What happened? Now, I've tried to make all these articles available. One is called Singapore's Blood Money. It's on your way out. If you want to get a copy, please do so. It's got a nice looking picture of our Minister Mentor. It describes everything. The second one is called the Burma-Singapore Axis, Globalizing the Heroin Trade. It's got more information on Singapore's investments together with these drug lords. Now, when these articles came out, the Singapore Embassy in the US wrote a letter, and said that Singapore is just a passive investor in the Myanmar Fund, which I showed you earlier on, and was not in the investment decisions of the fund. Well, there was one statement given by the Myanmar Fund itself, a document from the fund itself in 1994, which states that the GIC is a core shareholder. It had 21.5%. The biggest shareholder was I think it was Morgan Trust Guarantee Company or something, it had 42%. So GI, between it and that company, they held 63% of shares of Myanmar Fund. And the committee, and as such a representative on the investment committee of the fund, quote, "The committee will determine whether investment proposals and whether they should be approved for investment by the GIC held in the Myanmar Fund." that translated to about $10 million. Right? We have about more than $1 billion invested in Burma. You heard the US official statement just now, that more than half of it was tied with the family of Lo Sing Hai. All right? You're talking about $500 million there. You remove the GIC funds of $10 million, you have about $490 million still tied in with Lo Sing Hai's company. This is why it's so important for us to ask the government to open up the books of the GIC for us to examine, for us to look at. Where are these investments going to? And mind you, this is not Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's money. This is our money. And if we keep quiet about it, ladies and gentlemen, we are all going to be just as responsible for the hanging. And I say this with all sincerity. We need to talk about this issue in a very pragmatic way. And if you really want to be pragmatic, you cannot escape all these issues. We're going to come up with a casino. You've not even solved these problems about money laundering. An author of drug trafficking in Burma, an expert on that, Bruce Hall, says the entry of money from legitimate global systems is not Burma but Singapore. Are these not issues that we need to be concerned about? And I hope that today, at least, even if the media doesn't want to publish a word of it, the little that we've been able to do to get this information out will not fall on deaf ears. Because as sure as the situation is right now with Shanmugam due to be hanged in 3 to 4 weeks, or maybe even less than that, we will all just be as guilty if we just sat on our hands and not do anything about it. I will announce some initiatives that we can try to do, but I really, really hope that you find it in yourselves, have your conscience, come out right, speak out against this issue, and say that the hanging of Mr. Shanmugam and any other drug trafficker is one that is unjust and one that we cannot tolerate, not for one more day. Thank you very much.
That while they're waiting for sentencing, or while they're waiting for execution, there's this prolonged agony for the family. And I think the court can certainly do more if they are ever going to do anything like this, is to ensure that they are given whatever assistance possible by mental health professionals, by social services, to ensure that all kinds of support will be given to them. At one level, financial support. At a deeper level, social, emotional, psychological support. So that the family can be helped through this traumatic experience they're having towards the day when the person will be executed.
ஆர்மியில் 8 வருஷம் இருந்தார், நல்ல பேர் எடுத்தான். அவன் பிடிச்சிட்டு போன உடனே வந்து அங்கேருந்து மெடல் கொண்டு வந்து என்ன இடத்துல கொடுத்தாங்க, நான் வாங்கி வீட்டில் வச்சிருக்கிறேன்.
He served the military for 8 years and he had no problem. And
அப்புறம் அமெரிக்கா வரைக்கும் போய் ஸ்போர்ட்டு பந்தயத்தில் நல்லா பரிசு வாங்கிட்டு வந்தேன். அந்த ஊர் குடிமகனாக இருந்து அந்த நாட்டில் போய் நல்லா பரிசு வாங்கிட்டு வந்தேன்.
he went to he was in US winning jet ski competition for Singapore in 1995 and did proud to Singapore and financed his own way in this sports activity. It was quite expensive and he did proud to Singapore.
யாரோ இந்த மாதிரி மலேசியாவுக்கு அடிக்கடி போவோம், ஸ்போர்ட் ரிப்பேருக்காக போவோம். இந்த மோட்டர் வச்சிருந்த இடத்துல யாரோ வச்சு விட்டுட்டாங்க, இவனை காட்டி விட்டுட்டாங்க. பார்க்காம எடுத்துட்டு வந்துட்டான் அந்த மோட்டரை.
She says that she was involved in this this mechanical stuff relating to the jet ski equipment, and he was constantly going to Johor Bahru, and hence he was involved and got within the setup.
பிடிச்ச உடனே கொண்டுட்டு போய் அவன் வாடகை வீடு ஒன்று இருந்துச்சு, அந்த வீட்டில் போய் எல்லாத்தையும் கிண்டி கலங்க எடுத்துட்டு அங்கே ஒன்றும் இல்லை. அப்புறம் என் வீட்டுக்கு கொண்டுட்டு வந்தாங்க. ராத்திரி 9 மணி இருக்கும். என்னடா செஞ்சேன்? நான் ஒன்றும் செய்யலைம்மா, என்னை பிடிச்சிட்டாங்க, நான் எதுவுமே செய்யலை, ஆனால் பிடிச்சிருந்தேன், இழுத்தேன், என் கவலையை போக்குறதுக்கு நான் இழுத்தேன், அந்த ஒரு தப்பை தான் செஞ்சேன்.
He was already a divorcee and he was fighting for the custody of the boys, and this was one or two occasions he went into consumption, and hence he got caught into this just to forget his misery over his his ex-wife and the whole custody process.
கோர்ட்டுக்கு போட்டு கொண்டு போயிட்டாங்க. சைடில் வண்டி வச்சுருந்தாங்க. 6 மாசமா தானே. சரி போய் பார்த்துட்டு வந்தேன். சப்கோர்ட்டில் கேஸ் நடக்கும்போது என்னை கூப்பிடவும் இல்லை, கொள்ளவும் இல்லை. எனக்கு தெரியாது என்ன பேசுனாங்கன்னு. அப்புறம் ஹைகோர்ட்டு கொண்டு போனாங்க. ஹைகோர்ட்டுக்கு கொண்டு போகும்போது என்னிடம் காசு இல்லாதனால கவர்மெண்ட் லாயரையா எடுத்து பிக்ஸ் பண்ணி வச்சிருந்தேன்.
She said when the case was involved in the subcourt, she was not informed, and he was trying to handle it himself. When it went before the High Court, he was assigned state counsel. They have assigned state counsel scheme because he couldn't afford to pay his lawyers, so the state assigned counsel.
அப்போ அதுலேயே அவங்க தோல்வி அடைஞ்ச உடனே நான் என்ன பண்ணினேன், இருக்கிறது ஒரே ஒரு வீடு தான் எனக்கு. அந்த வீட்டை காமிச்சு 15,000 வெள்ளி வாங்கி பீட்டர் பின்னாண்டாயிரம் எடுத்தேன். அந்த லாயரை எடுத்தேன் சூப்பரண்ட் கோர்ட்டுக்கு.
So she says she has gone to a lawyer, and she she has got this HDB house which she declared to get money from some of her relatives, sum of $15,000 for legal fees.
பலன் கிடைக்கல. 1.5 வருஷமா கிட்டத்தான் இருக்கிறது. பிள்ளைகளை பார்க்க ஆரம்பம் இல்லை. எனக்கு அடிக்கடி முடியல. இடுப்பு வேற வச்சிருக்கு. எந்த வேலையும் செய்ய முடியல.
So she says that she has got
சந்தாவில் 150 வெள்ளி கொடுக்குறாங்க. பிரைமரி கோர்ட்ல 120 வெள்ளி கொடுக்குறாங்க. அதை வச்சு நான் என்ன செய்ய முடியும்?
She says that she has no sort of help. She gets basically $150 from Sinda. That's the only source of help she has. And she has a metal plate affixed to her spine. She did the spinal surgery in some remote place in India. And she's struggling on her own with this problem. And she has no source of help. She says that she can't hold to herself anything. And she might just suffer, stroke.
ஆனால் ஸ்கூலில் போய் எல்லா ஸ்கூல்லையும் 2 ஸ்கூல்லையும் போய் அழுது முறையிட்டு இந்த பிள்ளைகளை எப்படி நான் படிக்க வைக்கிறேன்னு அவங்க எல்லாமே பெரியா கொடுத்தாங்க. புக்கு யூனிஃபார்ம்ல இருந்து ஸ்கூல் ஃபீஸ் ஒருத்தனுக்கு கட்ட சொல்றாங்க, ஒருத்தனுக்கு கட்ட வேணாங்கிறாங்க. என்ன கட்டாம வச்சிருக்கிறேன், எங்க இருந்து கட்டுவேன் நான்? எனக்கு ஒரு தூக்கு கொடுக்காம ஒரு 20 வருஷம் போட்டாலும் சரி, 5 வருஷம் போட்டாலும் சரி, என் மையம் உயிரோட இருக்கு. நான் தென்போட இருப்பேன். அந்த பிள்ளைகளையும் நான் நல்ல முறையா வளர்ப்பேன்.
She says that, please, if you want to give 15 years or 20 years or even 30 years for that matter, at least I will see him alive and we will draw the strength at least, at least in my lifetime, while I'm looking after these children. The boys will have some solace to see that. And this is the first time that he has done out of his own folly, and please don't take his life.
எனக்கு 61 வயசு. அது எந்த வேலையும் செய்ய முடியல. இப்போ ஆஸ்பத்திரியில 15 நாள் கிடந்த மனநோய்ங்கிறாங்க, ஆஸ்மாங்கிறாங்க, ரத்த கொதிப்புங்கிறாங்க. எந்த வியாதி என்னால தாங்க.
She says that she's extremely stressed, and that she has gone for consultation. They're saying that she has mental depression, and her blood level is up, and they're saying that she's not well basically, and she says how can she move forward with this?
கர்நாடகாட்டுங்க என் பிள்ளைய தூக்கல போட வேணாம். தூக்கல மாட்டா நானும் செத்துடுவேன். உயிரோட இருக்க மாட்டேன்.
We have to wrap it up here because I think it's too distressful for her, and she says that she will end her life if her son's life is taken. I know it's very distressful, but this is something which I have been going through the last 2 weeks since I took up this case, and I hope the community can come forward and give them some help. At the same time, last Friday 2 Malay guys were hanged. and we don't have any records of all this. So people can actually report to Think Center, for example, of such records of drug traffickers who are on the road. Many of these families are very poor, and they're struggling on their own. At least we can develop a volunteer group to help them. And also at the same time, please do your part. Write to the president, express your concern and in support of the plea.
Following this forum, many of us were going to write an appeal pleading to President Nathan to spare the life of Shanmugam. We could have very easily drafted a letter and just passed around, ask everybody to sign. But we decided against it. What we would like to do is to ask everybody to pen your own letter. It needn't be a beautifully typed letter on anything that you can find right now. Let it come from your heart. Write that letter, sign your own name. And after this forum, we're going to make arrangements to go down to the Istana, just out here, take the MRT, or if we've got some cars that are available, go down to the Garden House and ask them to please hand this letter to President Nathan. It's Shanmugam's only way out right now. There's no more appeals, nothing else that we can do. Just go down. I don't know if this is relevant or not, but I know some of you may be very fearful of doing something like that because in the Singapore context, you don't do things like that. But I ask you to think, if you are afraid, think of what Shanmugam is going through as he sits in his cell. I've been there before, not for the death penalty, but even just being there for a month, you feel the loneliness, you feel being away from your loved ones. But in his case, he knows he's never going to see them again. So if you are afraid, for once, overcome that fear. Be un-Singaporean just this one time, for Shanmugam's sake. Write your own appeal letter. Dear Mr. President, please spare his life, because there are many, many questions about our system. Yes, Shanmugam committed a crime, but he doesn't deserve to die. After that, please, after the forum at 5 o'clock.
He was want to make a comment. Perhaps he can begin that.
My name is Jufri bin Abdul Razak. Yeah, I was escaped from gallows. At that time was 1992. About 20 months I was at the gallows. I appealed. I put my lawyer Peter Fernando and Peter Leo Fernando. I was false. Then about my second appeal, my mother paid for JB, and JB helped me escape from the gallows. That time I was not involved in the murder case, but my friend said he don't know me. But the first man was caught. He said I was in there, but no fingerprints, no anything. The witness said dark man. I am not dark man. I'm a white man literally. Then I was, if you at the gallows, you will know that no say you will suffer. At least if you sentenced to death, no use, At least if you 30 or 40 years, you can see the light, you can see something or anything. In there, you can hear the people hanging in front of somebody. Sometimes in front of you people, every Friday they will hang, they will walk in front of you. I want to say, I hope you please have this ladies and this guy was because I go there. If you give me a 40 year or 50 year, I was very certain that, you know, because if you die, you cannot see anything, you cannot eat anything, everything you cannot do in there. Okay, that's all I want to say. Please help.
Shall I look?
Give the police officer a big hand.
So does this mean that next time I come into Singapore, I'll be frisked, my things will be checked, my PC taken away from me? Can I ask you these questions? No, you're doing your job, I appreciate that. But I have questions of my own as a citizen.
So how can I help?
Pay your salary.
You pay taxes.
Well, I used to pay taxes,
Overseas employment only.
but I'm no longer employed anywhere here.
Okay. So there, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
But I don't have your name because I'd like to have
And I think if that's the case, we have to follow up who's the guy.
Tian.
Yeah, from
Can I just borrow that for a bit?
Now, whilst you're all waiting, I take it, whilst the officer here is doing his stuff. Do I take it that the rest of all of you here who have remained behind will join us in writing this letter to President Nathan? Please, stay. Okay, stay. We need you. We need you to stay for... Now, again, one thing, you have written your letters, haven't you? I take it that even if it's a short note, just write just a simple letter to His Excellency President Nathan. And then if you could, then later maybe have a word with Madam Lechman, just give her a bit of moral support and encouragement.
But I also want to make a statement now, because I think it is ridiculous for them to ask for my IC, because, you know, they do not ask everybody's IC, why me? Very strange. And
Never seen you before.
I come from across the causeway on Fridays. They would have record. This woman is already in the country. So stuff like that. What I understand from my own experience of activism and with police, because we do want to have police to be aware of rights of citizens and to have police appreciate rule of law and human rights. I think this is the kind of intimidation which I face in other places as well. Meaning they want to intimidate me, one, and then if I don't know my rights, I'm probably like, you know, all over the place. But even if I do know my rights, it doesn't mean that I won't get flabbergasted by the particular act because I'm singled out. And the other thing, it serves to intimidate the people who are watching the scene. And that's usual. This is a standard police tactic, where then they do this, they rush in, they create all this commotion. It frightens a lot of other people who think, oh, perhaps today I want to do that extra thing. Perhaps today I'll walk to the Istana. And then it gives this whole fear in that, you see? But I think it is, even if you do not want to do this march with us right now, you can always do it in another time. You can still write your letters. But please do not view this, you know, if you're frightened by this particular small thing which our friend from the police, Mr. Yeo, had done upon instructions by his superiors, I think it would be unhelpful to all of our causes in the future. It's just a simple thing. We are here to understand, to share and support Madam Lechmi, right? We want to hear another version of it which we do not get in the press. I think it's perfectly okay. In most other places, it's okay. In a lot of repressive regimes in the whole region, it is okay. So I think it's time for Singapore. I mean, I heard so many things about VGD, about opening space. Oh, wow. This is the time for me to come home. This is the time for me to do something. And then, this thing happens. But of course, I'm not intimidated. I can tell you next time I come, we want to check your passport. But they're so stupid because you know where I live, I said.
We haven't seen her when she's angry.
Turn on the camera.
Is there something that you would like to do?
I'm just being around here.
Because I'm just expressing my frustration. We do have free speech. The last time I looked in the Constitution.
Or if you don't have to, please, we would like to discuss if your officers could Just is there something else you'd like to tell me, or that's water? Good. Okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I say again, what we're going to do is this. If you've got your letters, we're going to go down to the lobby, and then from there, for those of us who are going to take the MRT, I'm going to take the MRT. We'll go to the MRT there. We'll take the train to, as I said, Dhoby Ghaut station, and we'll meet there. They'll bring Madam Lakshmi and the two boys to drive them down to Istana, and then we'll just give our letters to the police that are standing out there. Take it to them and please tell them, hand this over to the president, and then leave from there. Okay? All right. As I said, how many